Om Ajnanatirmahannasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagnan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jairgati Matsarvasvapadam Bojo Shri Radha Madanamo Hano Divyat Vrindaranya Asanasto Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasari Vamsi Vata Tatastitaha Karshan Veno Svaner Gopi Gopinata Shriyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangurlankayate Garim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itina Hare Krishna Mata. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
So, reading from the second canto, 10th chapter, 21st verse. The 10th chapter is entitled The Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. So I will go ahead and read the Sanskrit once, and then we'll get straight into the verse. Yadatmani niralokam atmanam cha tidrakshataha nirbhine yakshini tasya jyotish chakshur kunagraha. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Abhay Charanarvindam Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thus, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see Himself and all that was created. Thus, the eyes, the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The universe is by nature dense darkness, and therefore the total creation is called tamas, or darkness. The night is the real feature of the universe, for then one cannot see anything, including himself. The Lord, out of his causeless mercy, first desired to see himself and all the creation as well, and thus the sun became manifested. The power of vision for all living entities became possible, and the objects of vision were also manifested. This means that the whole phenomenal world became visible after the creation of the sun. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chevam Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Nashta prayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavati sevaya bhagavate uttamashloker bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Thus, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. So, we are on to the 10th chapter of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the last chapter within the second canto. And as I'm sure you're all aware, at the moment, the Virat Rup is being described. Now, this will be the third time in the second canto that the Virat Rup has been described. It's also been described, if we can cast our mind back, within the first chapter, 26th verse to 37th verse. It's been described in the 5th chapter and in the 6th chapter, and it's being described again in the 10th chapter. Actually, many people who've listened to my classes on Srimad Bhagavatam will know that I often quote the first verse of the 10th chapter of the second canto quite often, which is Sri Shuka Vacha Atra Sargo Visargascha Stanam Poshanam Uttaya Manvantare Shanukta Nirodo Muktir Ashraya. So Shukadev Goswami is actually pointing out the 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Atra Sargo Visargascha. So Sarga. Sarga means the primary creation of the universe. Visarga, the secondary creation of the cosmos, right? And if we look at the first and second canto, what are they called in English? Creation and the cosmic manifestation. So Srila Prabhupada has quite clearly denoted that the first and second canto are dealing specifically with these first two topics, Sarga and Visarga, creation and the sub-creation. Of course, Jiva Goswami states in his Brahma Sandarbha that all 10 of these different topics, so Sarga, primary creation, Visarga, secondary creation, Sthanam, the planetary systems, i.e. the forum of the living entities, Poshanam, maintenance, Uttaya, the impetus for activity, Manvantara, the changes of the Manus, Isha Anukta, the science of God, Nirodha, the science of going back to Godhead, Mukti, liberation, and Ashraya, which Prabhupada calls the summum bonum, the supreme shelter, or Krishna. All 10 of these different topics are included throughout all of the Bhagavatam. You'll find references to each one of these 10 topics and each one of the 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. However, there will be a predominance of one or two or three of these topics in a particular canto. For example, the 10th canto, we know, deals specifically with Krishna and his dealings with his devotees. So that's Ashraya. That 10th canto is predominated by the 10th topic. And equally, the first and second cantos are, as their English label denotes, predominantly dealing with creation, Sarga, and sub-creation, Visarga. Sarga, how does any of this exist? Where does it come from? You know, I often used to have this kind of discussion with my physics teacher at school when they were talking about Big Bang Theory. And they said, yes, there was a large bang. And from that bang, all the atoms were thrown out. And then they had an attraction, and then all sorts of other things started. They started spinning, and I said, okay, all of that may be true. But what caused the initial thing to bang? What was the cause of that initial thing? What was that initial thing? And if there was nothing, what was it expanding into? There's no forum. And they would come with some kind of excuse, oh, it's a singularity. They'd come up with these technical singularity and this. But they would never really be able to correct the shortcomings of their theory. But the Srimad Bhagavatam goes into such elaborate detail that there isn't any kind of, gray area. And we see that these first two cantos go into minute detail, not just about the creation of everything in a big way, but even the creation of the senses, even of the creation of the sense object, even the forum through which a particular sense and its sense object, the forum, the medium by which those two things connect. So nothing is left to this kind of gray, foggy, intellectually inconsistent theory. We really get into the detail of this, especially Sarga and Visarga in these first two cantos. But it's interesting, however, that even though we're dealing with Virat Rup, this chapter is called what? The Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Okay, what questions specifically is Srila Prabhupada or is Vyasadeva or Shukadev Goswami referring to? And actually, the question appears, if we cast our mind back to the 8th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 8th chapter, and 11th verse. And Parikshit actually asks a question. We may have forgotten now because it's probably been many weeks, but he asked the question to Sukadeva Goswami. He says, "O learned Brahmana, it was formally explained that all the planets of the universe, with their respected governors, are situated in the different parts of the gigantic body of the Virat Purush. I have also heard that the different planetary systems are supposed to be in the gigantic body of the Virat Purush." So he's talking not just of, Parikshit's asking all the planets and all the planets' governors, right? So we have the sun, and then we have the governor of the sun, which is the sun god, right? Vivishwan. Surya is the sun, and Vivishwan is the sun god. He's saying all of these in the Virat Rup, but also the planetary systems. We know that there's 14 planetary systems in this universe. What is their actual position? Parikshit is asking. Will you please explain that? So he asks this back in the 2nd canto, in the 8th chapter, 11th verse. And of course, different things have been talked about, but that question hasn't been answered head on. And it's not until actually the last verse of the 9th chapter that Shukadev Goswami says, "O king, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead." That gigantic form means the Virat Rup. Virat means the creation, and Rupa means form. So the form of the Lord that is symbolized by this creation. So Shukadev is saying, O King Parikshit, your question as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned. So that's the Chaturshloki Bhagavat that I know we all went through in great detail previously. So again, that Chaturshloki Bhagavat is the bija, is the seed from which all the rest of the Bhagavatam expands, including this chapter. So basically what I'm saying, 2.8, 2.8.11, Shukadev asks the question. 2.9.46, Parikshit asked the question in 2.8.11. 2.9.46, Shukadev Goswami attempts to answer. And 2.10 is the elaborate answer to those questions about where the planets are in the Virat Rup and where the planetary systems, and what is the real interaction of all of these things. What is the purpose? What is the explanation? So that's what we're dealing with here in this 10th chapter. And excuse me, as we progress into this chapter, we see that we're dealing with many different topics. But in fact, we could largely, or broadly speaking, break this chapter down into 3 or 4 different parts. We've got that initial verse that I talked about, which is where the topics of the Bhagavatam are explained. But then from and there's more definition given on the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. But then from the 10th verse, which is the 10th to the 35th verse, which is where we find ourselves at the moment, is where some very interesting information is given about directly pertaining to Parikshit Maharaj's question. His question of what are the planets, how do they relate to the Virat Purush, what are the planetary systems? And I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but I think this feeds into today's class. The first point that is made is actually 2.10.14. And in 2.10.14, the Lord divides his energies into three. Adidevic, Adhyatmic, and Adibautic. Or Adidaivam, Adhyatmam, Adibhutam. Now, those of us who have read Lecture of Instruction, we know about Adhyatmic Klesh, Adibautic Klesh, Adidevic Klesh. Adhyatmic Klesh means the suffering which is felt by oneself, that which pertains to the self, to the mind, and to the physical body. Adhyatmic. Adibautic is that pain which comes from the world to the physical body, either because of people's talk, or maybe a mosquito comes to bite you. And Adidevic is the effect of the devas who are in control of the material nature. If it's too hot, that's the effect of Surya Dev. If it's too windy, that is the effect of Vayu Dev. If there are big waves, that's the moon affecting the ocean. That is the effect of Chandra Dev. So actually, 2.10.14, Shukadev Goswami gives this subdivision of Adidevic, Adhyatmic, Adibautic. So Adidevam are the controlling entities. They are the devatas. Adhyatmam, they are the controlled entities. That's us, the other living entities within this. And Adibhutam, Bhutam means the world. That is the material body, right? The material bodies. So already we're getting a clue. Shukadev Goswami is giving us a clue of this interaction between how the devas, the material body, and the functions of the material body, right? Like the senses and its operation, and the living entities within those material bodies, how these are starting to interact, right? The interaction between Adidevam, Adhyatmam, Adibhutam. So we need to understand that the Lord's energy is divided into these three. So then we can say, okay, what does this have to do with the Virat Roop, right? The Virat Roop is an expansion of the Lord, and this is the subdivision of the Lord's energy. But we should understand that as the Lord is the cause of everything else in this world, he is the cause, he is the origin. Naturally, the Lord's qualities, or the Lord's form as the Virat Roop, its qualities will permeate anything which is derived from it, right? In the same way that if you had a huge ocean of salt water, you go to the ocean. If you were to take a small glass of that water, the nature of the ocean will naturally influence the nature of the water that you collect from the ocean, right? The product of that ocean. The ocean is salty, the water you collect from the ocean will be salty. The ocean is wet, the water within the glass will be wet. So in the same way, the Virat Roop, understanding the Virat Roop will give an indication or has a bearing on anything that is to be a product of the Virat Roop. So in the same way, the Deva, Adidevam, the Adhyatmam, the Adibhutam, the way that the Devas are, the way that the living entities are, the way that their bodies, material bodies are, the way that they interact, have naturally extended from their origin. The origin is what? The Virat Purush, the Virat Roop. The Virat Roop is the origin, and therefore it will have a bearing, right? If you have a field full of green grass, and you pick some plants from that place, the grass that you take from that place will naturally reflect the nature of the grass in that field. It won't look like the weeds in another field, it won't look like the flowers in another field. It will look like the origin. So in the same way, the product of the Virat Root will naturally have the qualities of its origin. Okay, so this is the connection. This is the connection that Parikshit is trying to piece together, right? And actually and Srila Prabhupada makes a very good point in 2:10:16 in the purport. And I'll actually read this purport because it's important. He says, the individual living entities are completely dependent on the total energy of the Supreme Purusha. No one has independent existence, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence. Each and every electrical instrument depends fully on the total powerhouse, right? Powerhouse means the generator behind the whole system. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity, which depends on the clouds depend on the sun depends on creation, the creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. But the point being that an electrical lamp, right? There's so many electrical lamps, or there's so many electrical devices that we're using today. You know, we've got people in Kenya, we have people in London, we're all dependent on this energy. But the centralized grid is the basis on which all of these individual items are working. The centralized grid, the source of that power, is affecting the operation. As soon as that power is taken away, doesn't matter if it's my computer, all of our computers will stop working. In the same way, the Virat Purush is the effect, is the cause behind all of these other things working. We may feel, oh, this is my body. But as soon as the Lord retracts his energy and influence from this Virat, from this creation, everything stops. Everything. You, me, everything. All of our physical bodies, they stop working and they'll stop functioning in that way. So that's where we're getting to. We're having that. We've got Parikshit's question, we've got Shukadev's answer, and he's breaking it up. He's showing that there's three classifications. Those three classifications are coming ultimately from the Virat Purush, and that is the nature of the interaction. So then we get to verse 17, right? Verse 17 that I'm sure you've talked of. And verse 17, just pull that up so I can reference that properly. Verse 17 is, the living force being agitated by the Virat Purush generated hunger and thirst when he, i.e. the Virat Purush, the Supreme Lord, desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened, right? So the Virat Purush generated hunger and thirst when he desired to drink and eat. So we can see that this interaction between the senses and the sense object comes from where? Ultimately, it comes from the Lord's desire. The Lord's desire. The Lord's desire is actually the source of all of the different desires. Our desires are just a reflection, an extension of the Lord's desires. So in the same way that the attribute of the seawater is salty, and therefore the droplets of the sea is salty, if the Lord has desires and we see our origin in the Lord, we naturally exhibit those desires, albeit in a microcosmic way. So the Lord's desires is what's causing this. So then we come to our verse today, which is, thus when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. Who knows this verse? Rasoham apshakonteya prabhasmi shashi shurya. Prabhasmi shashi shurya. That the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita that prabhasmi, the light of the sun, I am the light of the sun and the moon. Prabhasmi shashi shurya. So that's again tying into this here. So, and now this verse is very good because it answers, this chapter is called, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. So this verse directly encapsulates the answer that Parikshit Maharaj is looking for. He's looking for how is the Virat Purush related to the planets and the planetary system, and how are they all interconnected? So we've got it here. We've already said that, Shukadev's already said that there's subdivisions of energy. There's the Devas, there's the Atmas, there's the Bhuta, right? There's the controlling, there's the controlled, and then there's the body. Then we see that we've got the desires. But now here, Shukadev is talking about the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. So effectively, what do we have? We've got 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 different features here. We've got, first of all, the first feature, and you'll see this throughout this part of the chapter, between text 10 and text 35, you've got 5 different things in operation. First of all, you've got the Lord's desire. So here, the Lord's desire is to see. He wants to see what he's created, right? That's the Lord's desire. And then you've got the gross sense object, or you've got the gross sense organ, I should say, right? Which is what? The akshanis. You need to have the eyes. So the Lord has created, first of all, he has his desire, and then he's created the eyes to be able to see, right? And then he's created the process of seeing, okay? The power of vision. You see that in the verse, the power of vision. So his desire, he's got the gross organ, and he's got the power of that organ, which is then in play. And then he's got the Devata who is in control of that process. So in this case, it's the illuminating sun, the sun god, Surya, Vivishva, right? So you've got the planet, that's the Adidevic element. And then you have what's called the Tanmatra, which is the interaction between the sense process and the material element. So we know earth, water, fire, air, ether. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Now, fire is the material element that gives off light. So now we have form and fire, right? The ability to see form and fire have now become linked. Just like touch and air are linked. Just like smell and earth are linked, right? So we've got 5 different things that are going on. The Lord's desire, the sense organ, the process of that sense, the Devata, the planet, along with the presiding deity, which is in charge of making that thing happen, and then the process by which it happens, right? That Devata produces light, right? That fire, and therefore you can see form. So in all of these verses, systematically, these 5 features are given. Lord's desire, I've said it 3 times, I'm going to say it again. The Lord's desire, the sense organ that is created, the process of that sense, the Devata, his planet, and what it does, right? So in this case, it's Surya and light, and then the Tanmatra, how the process of seeing a form is then connected with fire, which creates light. So I hope that makes sense. So in all throughout this, so if we were to see the verse before, thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, right? He desired to smell. The nostrils and respiration, that's the gross organ, were generated. The nasal, intermittent odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, Vayu, carrying smell, also became manifested. So you see again, verse 20, the verse before, the Lord's desire is there, right? He wants to smell. He's then created the nose. That's the sense organ. That then creates the process of smelling has then come into thing. He then has the Devata, Vayu. Vayu is the Devata. And then his planet or his place of residence is then part of the Virat group. And then we see that smell, the process of smelling, is connected to the earth. That's the Tanmatra. That's how the gross element in existence then connects with that process of smelling. So systematically, we see Parikshit Maharaj is now having his questions answered. He wants to understand how all of these planets and their governors, the deity, the Devata, who is responsible for these planets, like Chandralok or Suryalok, and they're situated. Why are they there? How do they connect with this Virat Purush? Why did they come into existence? You know, and these systems within the gigantic body of Virat Purush, what is their actual position? What is their actual function? And we see that between verses 10 and 35, very systematically Shukadev Goswami has categorized it. First, the Lord Desire comes. Then, because his desire is to do this, so he creates this particular organ. He then creates, this organ creates that function. And then there's this Devata who's overseeing this function. And because that Devata will create the fire that creates the fire that will allow you to see the form. He creates the air which will allow you to have the touch, or the earth which will allow you to have this smell. So it's very, very systematically gone through, and Parikshit should have all of his questions, frankly, answered by going through the Virat Roop in this way. Yet we can also see that why is it that we have to go through this Virat Roop on so many different occasions? You know, we've gone through it, as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of this canto, second canto, first chapter, verses 26 to 37. You know, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, actually, on this occasion, earlier on in the canto, the Virat Roop has gone through. You see, the Virat Roop is brought into effect. Why? It's even brought into effect in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's in an interesting question, because the Virat Roop, in one sense, is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is a cosmic representation of the Lord. We even have the Purusha Shukta in the Rig Veda. So we've got so many different descriptions of the Virat Purush, but why do we keep on going back to this indirect form of the Lord? And the reason for it is that it teaches the conditioned living entity who cannot or does not have the adhikar to directly perceive the Lord directly, who is contaminated by certain desires, by certain degree of ignorance, and by certain amount of avidya. So at the beginning of the second canto, the Virat Roop is given for those who cannot perceive the super soul. I mean, I can detect the presence of the super soul in the sense that I'm alive, but I've never seen a 6-inch form of Narayan or Krishna in my heart. I don't have that vision. Therefore, by focusing, and Prabhupada even references this, by focusing on how the Lord is the generative feature behind everything in existence, by constantly hearing and hearing and hearing about that, we can then start to be able to perceive the Lord in everything rather than seeing opportunities for our sense gratification. If we hear how the mountains are the Lord's bones and the rivers are his blood, we don't see a river as somewhere where, oh, we can make money if we make all these chemicals and we can just dump it in the river where no one can see. Because we see that actually this world is not for our enjoyment. The rivers are the Lord's veins. That's his blood flowing. The Lord is the creation of that. How could we be so, delusional to think that this world is for our enjoyment? Actually, there's a creator behind it. If we go into someone else's home, we should treat it respectfully. So you see, it reinforces and it recalibrates the corrupted consciousness of the living entity to ultimately come to the platform of clearing his avidya, cheto darpana marjana, clearing all of that contamination and seeing his true self and the Lord's true self as a Paramatma in the heart. So in 2.753, also in this canto, it is said that the Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. We're in illusion. We're in illusion that we are the controller. We're in illusion that this world is our form to enjoy. We're in illusion because we hear all of this propaganda. Oh, this world just happened by chance. You only live once. go out and enjoy to the max. You know, we are subtly contaminated by this paradigm that everything is just here, our forum to enjoy. And so long as you have that vishai, that enjoying mentality, what happens? You are thrown into the cycle of birth and death. You're thrown into the cycle, constantly hankering and lamenting, hankering after enjoyment. You get the object of enjoyment, and all of a sudden you're lamenting that, oh, you know, I really wanted to throw this big party. And you have the party and then it's over. And then you lament, oh, now there's nothing to look forward to. Or you hanker after getting a brand new Mercedes. And you get that Mercedes, and 6 months later they release a new model. And then you lament, I worked so hard to get this Mercedes and now it's the old Mercedes. Or somebody sees that Mercedes and scratches it. You think, I spent so much money on this Mercedes. I spent so much time trying to get this Mercedes and now it's damaged. And then you fix it. And then the next day someone damages it again, hankering and lamenting. See, we can never be happy in this material. And if we are under illusion that this world is anything else but the Lord's property for the Lord to enjoy, then we can never come to the level of perceiving the Lord directly. So the Lord makes it simple that even if we just have this mundane consciousness, we can train ourselves to see the Lord in everything, in everything. And as this verse in the 7th chapter of this canto says, if we do that with proper devotion and proper respect, we then become eligible to see the Lord in his localized form as Paramatma and ultimately face to face as Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna. The source of all of the anksas, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So that's the first reason that the Virat Rupa is put down, to allow us to see the Lord where otherwise our conditioning wouldn't allow. The second time that the Virat Rupa is brought up is in the 5th chapter. It's the second description. And that is then to show how the Lord is actually the basis, not just of all of cosmic existence, but he's actually the basis of many of the traits that we see within society. Many of the traits. You know, there's a group of theologians who are called deists. Now, deists believe in a supreme creator, but they say that once the Lord has created this forum, he then removes and has nothing to do with it. And it's for us to work things out, and we are ultimately alone in this forum. The Lord has created this playpen for us, but we're alone. But that's not what the Lord is saying. Just like we gave the example before, that the product is always similar to its origin. In the same way, our propensities play out in a social atmosphere, and they ultimately stem from the Lord. You know, in the second Virat Rupa, the Lord is talking about the 4 varnas of society. He said, from my head comes the Brahmanas, from my arms comes the Kshatriyas, sometimes it's given as the stomach and sometimes it's given as thighs, come the Vaishyas, and from my feet come the Shudras. Because just like the brain thinks and is conceptual and strategic, that's the nature of the Brahmanas. They're contemplating. Just like the arms are powerful and they're proactive and they can defend and they can attack, that's the nature of the Kshatriyas. Just like the stomach is given and then redistributes, that's the nature of Vaishyas. They take where there is surplus in one place and sell it where there is scarcity somewhere else for a profit. And they benefit society at large. And just like this whole of society, the human body depends on the feet. So the society depends on the hard work or the artistry or the entertainment of the Shudras. You know, the beautiful paintings, the beautiful music, the hard work. They allow society to move. Where would we be without hard work? Where would we be without recreation? And the Shudras provide that. So that part of the Virat Rupa is showing how, you know, many people, there's many ideologies which say, no, why do we artificially divide society into these communities? But if you look in any society, people will gravitate into those communities anyway. There will always be the intellectuals. There will always be those who are martial and brave and honorable. There'll always be those who have an affinity for making money. And there'll always be those who have great artistry or are extremely hardworking, are indispensable members for the team. And the Lord is saying, do not reject this as an artificial construct. Know that this has come and has been given by me, actually as a benediction. And when you understand that this is an eternal principle, you can see the Lord at work even within society. And you can see where we are trying to artificially imitate the Lord, or where society is trying to naturally serve the Lord. If the child tries to imitate the parent, what will be the situation for the child? Not only will the parent be frustrated, but the child will also miss out. Because if the child was to surrender to the parent can cook a beautiful meal. If the child says, step aside, I'm cooking today, the child will not benefit. If the child says, step aside, I'm driving to Bhaktivedanta Mana or to ISKCON Eldoret, that won't be a great journey. But if the child recognizes that actually, I want to be driven somewhere, but who better than my parent to drive me? I want to eat, but rather than depending on me, why don't I depend on Krishna Prasad? Then the child's situation will be far better on. So when we realize that we have certain proclivities, we shouldn't try and exploit them. We shouldn't try to deny them, but we should try to engage them, reconnect them to the Supreme Lord, not in an artificial way, but in a genuine way. Then, as children of the Lord, we will benefit. We will benefit individually, society at large will benefit. So that's the second point of Virat group, is that we see that how to govern society, how to interact in society, where is the Lord's feature, how do we connect it with the Lord properly, how do we work in harmony? We are part of the Virat group. How do we work in harmony with our surroundings rather than in opposition to our surroundings? How do we work in harmony with our best interests rather than in opposition to our best interests? You know, we've got so many spirits, cleaning products which are white, are clear. Bleach is clear. Water is clear. We can say that looks like that. Therefore, I can drink either one and be hydrated. No, you have to understand what is what and how it functions. Otherwise, you're working against it. I feel thirsty. Let me drink some clear bleach. No, what are you talking about? It's not the same. So in the same way, if you say, you're hungry, you eat prasadam, I'm hungry, I eat meat. No, it's not the same. The outcomes are you need to understand how to work in harmony with your existence, with the Virat group, in order to get the ideal benefit that you are looking for. Therefore, the Virat group is described in the 5th chapter. And then finally, excuse me, the Virat group is described over here to give greater understanding as we said, of the interaction of the different planetary systems, the different personalities, and the different features of this world. The different features of this world. There are 26 in Sankhya philosophy. There are 26 different items which are existing in all of the universe. Every activity, every experience, every composite material can fit within one of these 26 activities of Sankhya. And if we understand these 26 different items and how they interact with each other, we can have a much more, how do you say? We have a much more complete understanding of what this material world actually exists for and what we can derive from this material world. People who think that this material world is the ultimate form for enjoyment do not understand what this material world is about. You know, this world is ever changing. Even if you create a perfect lifestyle in this world, everything will change. The surrounding around you will change, the seasons will change, the building that you have will change, your body will change. You create a perfect life even for a microsecond, but the world is constantly in flux. The senses and the sense of it. And that's why you have to go beyond the 26 things of this, the 25 elements of this world to what? The soul which is beyond the material creation. So this explanation here, where we're talking about all the different senses and the sense objects, we realize that the self is actually beyond all of this. And therefore, once you understand what the soul is not, you can begin to understand what the soul is. What are the activities of this material? What are the desires of this material world? What are the interactions of this material world? Okay, that's all of this. But that has nothing to do with the soul. So once you've got everything removed of what the soul isn't, you can then in earnest start to examine what the soul is, what is in the interest of the soul. Worshipping and surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the real activity of the soul. And that has nothing to do with this material creation. So in conclusion, there was a bit of a whistle-stop tour throughout a lot of the second canto, but we understand that there are 10 topics, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The two which are most predominant, of course, all 10 are in all the different 10 cantos. The two which are most predominant are Sarga and Visarga in these first two cantos. This particular chapter is answering the question which Shukadev Goswami asked, Parikshit Maharaja asked 2 chapters ago, in the 8th chapter. Shukadev Goswami at the end of the 9th chapter said, now I will provide you with the answers that you are looking for, the interaction of the Virat Rup and all of these different planets. And we can see in this particular section between 10 and 35 how very systematically we see the Lord's desire, we see the sense that the Lord desires to go through, we see that the process of that sense, we see the Devata that overviews that sense, and then we see the way in which that sense perception takes place. And every single verse you'll see will start to break it into these 5 different categories. We then realize that continual examination of the Virat Purush from a different perspective yields a different benefit. We're talking about the Lord. We're discussing about the Lord. By discussing the Lord, we can become eligible. By discussing the Lord in his form as the Virat Purush, it gives us eligibility to ultimately see the Lord as Swayam Bhagavan, Sri Hari, whether that be by purifying the senses and discussing the Lord, whether that by conducting ourselves properly within society, or whether that be by understanding all the features of what the Lord is not through the Virat Purush, to therefore understand what the Lord is not or what we are not, to therefore understand the nature of the soul and the nature of the Supreme Personality of God. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Quite a technical class, I hope, and quite how do you say, philosophically heavy. So if there are any comments, questions, and corrections, I'd be open to answering them now. Hare Krishna. I hope that wasn't too much all at once. I feel like that was quite a lot, but please forgive me. I'm not in the best of health at the moment, so maybe it wasn't conveyed in the best way. So please, any comments or corrections are welcome.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, your class was wonderful. And we have learned so much from you about how the Lord's desires to create. And he's, first of all, through his desires, he creates these gross sense objects, and the power of organ in this shloka, the power of vision, and if he facilitates the devatas in charge of every sense organ, and the 10 mantras, how the process of seeing is connected with the light, just like the Surya Dev who is in charge of this. So Prabhuji, we have learned so much about how we should work in harmony, just like the Virat Rupa is working in harmony with all these material elements and these different features and the demigods. So that is quite amazing for us to learn how to work in harmony, especially for our organization ISKCON. This harmony is so much needed.
I think when people understand their own natures, when we understand our own natures, then we can act in a way which we find not only fulfilling, but we can be even more productive.
Yes. So kindly let's...
Hare Krishna, everyone. Please
Hare
kindly accept
Krishna.
my humble obeisances. Oh, good Ishra Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very philosophical, you went deep in the explanation of the Virat Purusha. And also what I understand is that the demigods, they are parts of the Lord. They are like representatives of the Lord. So we should not kind of ignore them. We should not pray to them to get material benefits, but yet we should respect them because they have a function which is directed by the Lord himself. So they are great personalities. So we can actually pray to them to take us to their master, like take us to Krishna, because Krishna is their master as well. So in this way, we should not disregard them. That's I've learned. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
That's a wonderful point, Indulekha Mataji. You always provide such wonderful insights and line of thought. And we see here, and we'll see throughout this chapter, how, like you said, these particular devatas, these particular planets, are there to facilitate a desire of the Lord, a desire that we also share. The Lord wants to see his creation. We would also like to see the things that we create and that we do. And the Lord has put these devatas in charge to facilitate that desire. Now, of course, we don't pray to those devatas thinking that they have created the concept of sight. Like you said, they are just carrying out the order of the Lord for that particular function. But that doesn't mean that we can't be respectful unto them. And even I was listening today to Krishna book, it's like 33rd or 34th chapter, Vidyadhara, Liberated. And in that, Prabhupada is talking about Shivratri and how occasionally even the Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mai, and all of the residents of Vrindavan would observe Shivratri, not religiously, but sometimes on occasion. And Prabhupada says, and this shows that they are worshipping Lord Shiva not because they think he is the Supreme Lord, but because they are asking him, please allow us to become better devotees of the Supreme Lord. You are such a wonderful devotee of the Supreme Lord. Please grant us the benediction or assist us so that we may also follow in your footsteps and become better devotees of the Supreme Lord. So I really love that point, Mataji, very succinctly put. The devatas are there to do a function as ordained by the Supreme Lord. And therefore we should respect them for that function. We should not disregard. And if we are to offer worship to them, it is only to worship them in order to better our own devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any other person with a question or comment from the group? So if there is none, kindly let us unmute ourselves and chant one round of Hare Krishna Mahamantra for glorification of KrishnaArjuna Prabhuji for his wonderful class.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama, Rama
Rama,
Rama, Hare
Yasha Kripa Sindhu
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, अखंड कोटि ब्रह्मांड की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय, कृष्णार्जुना प्रभु जी की जय,
ISKCON Eldoret ki
जय। Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you, Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Thank you so much for this nice class. Hare Krishna.
thank you